Okay, so it's 8 o'clock and we'll get started. So good morning to everyone. We're a little more than halfway through the legislative session. I'll introduce myself, Laurel Ruggles. I'm working here with Darcy at the NEK Chamber, hosting these breakfasts. This is our third one. On Zoom once again, although Darcy's working with the St. J House, and hopefully we can be all together in one room in April, if it's safe to do so, and they're ready for us. So per our convention, we're going to start with our senators, Jane and Joe, this morning, and then Marcia Martel has to leave early, so we'll sneak you in first after the senators, Marcia. Does anyone else have to leave before 9? Any of the other representatives? John? Okay. You're actually, okay. We'll have you go right after Marcia, and then we'll try to go in alphabetical order, starting at the top of the alphabet with the A's, and go on to the rest of the alphabet after. Does that sound okay to everybody? All right. So Jane, can I ask you to start this morning?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I guess I'm going to start with reapportionment. The Senate did pass out a bill that reapportions. As I've mentioned in the past, we've seen population growth, but we've also seen where that growth has occurred. So with the 30 seats, reapportionment is a process to apportion the Senate seats based on population per Senate. And what has occurred is that Essex and Caledonia County have lost population relative to growth, which has been obviously in the northwest, Chittenden and Franklin counties. So the bill, after a lot of work, I'm not on that committee, ended up with, which is similar to what was done by the reapportionment independent commission, and that was create 3 single seat districts. Orleans would be a district, Essex, and then Caledonia. So the northern tier towns of Caledonia are going into that part of the Essex Orleans. This district, most people may not realize, included 6 Orange County towns. There, except for Newbury, those are going to be either moved one into Washington County and the rest back into an orange, into the Orange District. So I just wanted to let people know that you're going to see some different representation after next election. The total population of Vermont in the last census was around a little more than 643,000. So the ideal population per Senate seat would be 21,436. So you can go to the map and see. I know that the committee worked hard. There was a lot of different configurations. None are absolutely on the dime simply because of the population and getting the right configuration of contiguous towns. So the other area that has been certainly occupying my time as chair of the budget committee, and that is taking testimony on the 2023 budget. I'm not going to go into a lot of details because Representative Feltes is on the House committee and they just passed the bill out last week, so she can give an update on the details as they passed it. The only thing I would say is any organization or program that didn't get money on the House side is now sending emails to those of us on the Senate side, appealing their case as to be expected. The requests are, I don't know, millions and millions in excess of what we have available. And we do have obviously federal money, but as I said, we have to be really careful because underneath it is what we have for ongoing state revenues to support the budget. And one thing that has influenced those revenues is a bill that the House has passed, and that was instead of what the governor had proposed, and that would have a child tax credit, but the revenue impact of that would be a loss of around close to $50 million. So I think there are a couple of priority areas that we're here. Vermont State College System. The governor proposed the $5 million in the base, and that was all, no bridge money. The House did put in more base money, $5 million, but I believe Marty can confirm it, and I believe some bridge money, which for those of us who are, supportive of our state college system and the role that they play in higher education and workforce development, I'm happy that the House was able to do what they were, because the $5 million, in essence, was not the amount that was identified in the transformation plan as required to support that that transition to get the system stabilized. The other area that has been a topic of discussion, and that was our mental health and our services to intellectually and developmentally disabled individuals. That was a 3% increase. And when you juxtapose that with the salary increases in benefits of state employees, which was over 10, and the fact that they operate facilities that food costs, fuel costs, wages, et cetera, have really made agencies around the state that are already under a great deal of stress even more fragile. And the House did raise that to, I believe, 7% increase. They had requested 10. So that obviously is a request that has walked down to the first floor for further consideration. And then a couple of other bills, and then I'll end because other people might be reporting. And that is, we did pass the student waiting bill, and Representative Beck can speak much more detailed about that. It certainly has a benefit on the Northeast Kingdom region in terms of how that waiting would work and the impact or the factors that are included in that study, and how poverty is treated. Lots of emails on 3 wildlife bills that were in the Senate. Natural resources, only one of them came out, and it was basically on leg hold traps, which said rulemaking to make sure that the trapping is conforming to the evidence-based best practices that are currently identified at this point. So I think that is, last week was really busy for committees, because crossover, and every bill that has an appropriation has come through the appropriations committee. So we had bills on economic justice. It was just a litany of bills. And of course, every committee waits till the end to move their bill out, which really does create a lot of compression as those bills, either if they have a fee or revenue impact, would go to Ways and Means in the House, Finance in the Senate, and then on to appropriations. So that's sort of it for me at this point. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in this morning. And I'm going to, I guess, at this point, it's Senator Benning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Joe Benning, the junior state senator from Caledonia County. That's presently, anyway. As most of you know, I'm leaving that position to run for something else. I will also say that I live in the town of Linden, and in future events, no longer will Linden or Kirby be part of the Caledonia district. I will be frank, I am not real happy about the fact that Linden has been removed from the senatorial district. The new senatorial district that Linden will now be in looks very much like a squished question mark. And the period at the bottom of that question mark is the town of Linden. The new district would go from Linden through Kirby to Concord, over to the Connecticut River, all the way up the Connecticut River to Canaan, and then all the way west to Newport City. Anything to the north of Linden is now going to be part of the Orleans senatorial district. So we're talking Newark, Burke, Sutton, Sheffield and Wheelock will now be represented by Senator Starr, and anything to the west and south of the town of Linden, including the town of Newbury, makes up the New Caledonia District. Unfortunately, the population loss is what's caused this split. And the northwest quadrant of the state, Franklin and Chittenden counties, are the two counties that increased in population. So we knew we were going to lose a senator from the kingdom. But the way this particular arrangement was made is very much something I was opposed to. Unfortunately, with my announcement that I was not running again, that created the vacuum that I think the senators who were voting on this committee made their decisions. And there's not a whole lot you can do about that when you are now a lame duck. But suffice to say, I hope in 10 years from now, we either have a very large increase in the population or we have somebody that is willing to put Caledonia County back together again. I serve on two committees, two standing committees anyway. Judiciary is my morning committee, and this week we're going to be talking about a process that started with my very first bill in the legislature. Vermont has an expungement process for those who have been convicted of crimes and have been out of the criminal world for a very long period of time, and they have an ability to erase a record for certain offenses. And that was the first bill that I worked on in the legislature. There has always been a battle between those who believe expungement is appropriate, which means destroying the record, versus stealing of a record. And that conversation continues today. We are also talking about something interesting about an open adoption process, where literally there would be a change in whether adoption records remain sealed. That conversation is going on. The bill is called H629, and we're dealing with whether or not we should open up adoption records so that people who have been adopted have the ability to trace their own family history. And it's an interesting conversation inside the committee. I also chair the Senate Institutions Committee. Senate Institutions has just received, in fact, I don't think it's formally yet, but the Capitol bill is the vehicle that we work on through the session, but we don't get it until the House delivers it to us. At this point, I understand that the bill, at the very least, is either on the floor of the House or has come out. I was not there Friday because I was in trial, but I see Scott Campbell on the screen. I know he's in our counterpart committee in the House, and maybe he can update me as well as Marcia Martell. I think both of them are on that committee, but you guys can update us as to where exactly that bill is. Once we get that bill, it's roughly $124 million that we're talking about for all the state's brick and mortar. There have been many twists and turns along the way, and they include what to do with the state house and the court system. We have several courthouses that are in need of HVAC systems, and it's all a conversation in reopening our court system that has been very frustrating as a lawyer, I will have to say, because my caseload has created such a backlog as a result of these courthouses not being open. And there are people literally have been sitting in jail for well over a year trying to get their cases heard. And of course, everybody's supposed to be presumed innocent in the process. So our court system is a mess. It has to be repaired, and our committee is going to try to do a deep dive on that between now and the end of the session. With that, I will close by saying once again, it is an honor and a privilege to have served in this role. I'm not trying to leave the Senate. I'm trying to move my chair, and we'll see what happens as things go, but I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of this morning's discussion. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jane. And please, anybody who has questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them after everyone's had a chance to report. We have a couple of representatives who have to leave early this morning. That's Marcia Martell and John Kaczynska. So we're going to ask Marcia to go first, and then John, and then we'll go in more or less alphabetical order, and we'll have Scott Beck, Scott Campbell, Marty Feltus, and then Terry Williams. So Marcia, you want to start us off?
Yeah, good morning to all. Yes, Joe, we did get the bill out. It passed out of the House on Friday. We had hardly any questions. The guys, everybody on the committee did a great job. As you'll review it, I'm not 100% in favor of everything we did, but most of it's okay with me. And we had $113 million in ARPA funds that we had to decide what to do. So we kind of made sure that each branch, legislative branch, got some of that. And I know 15 plus million is going to go to making libraries ADA compliant. And then we wanted to have some connectivity at state parks. So when people are there, they can use their iPhones. So we helped them out with $1 million plus. And then we gave the energy committee needed some money for cell towers and broadband. So 48 plus million on that. And I forgot what the rest of it goes for because I don't have any paperwork in front of me because I was giving my eyes a break for the weekend. But I'll get over to you, and well, it'll be interesting to see how your committee receives it and the changes that are made. But I was glad to get it out. I'm sure Scott was as glad as I was to see it go out the door. But other than that, I don't have a lot to say about it. The big changes will be what you make and send back to us, and hope we don't have a conference committee. Thank you.
Okay, John, welcome this morning.
Yes, thank you. I guess the first thing I want to say is I'm really very appreciative to have been appointed to the House to fill an open seat that unfortunately Patrick Seymour needed to step away. We should thank him for his service to Allegheny County. So I've been in the legislature for a grand total of 10 days and have been learning a lot. The committee that I'm serving on is the Commerce and Economic Development Committee. We've spent most of our time since I've been there focusing on H703, which was a bill that was designed to provide significant support in terms of workforce development across a number of different sectors. And it's an incredibly long bill. So I think a couple of things I'll focus on here most with it. And I would encourage any viewers to take a look at the details of H703. There's quite a bit in there. One significant portion of that bill is in support of nursing educators here in a couple of different areas, one of which is to, quite frankly, provide some additional compensation for faculty who are in those positions across the state to be working with students who are looking to pursue nursing as a career to help recruit and retain our valuable nursing faculty, but not just nursing faculty, but other nursing staff who may be working in some clinical areas of things, as well as our preceptors. We've asked we've gotten great support from our hospitals across the state here. And I'll speak to NBRH. I'm most familiar with the NBRH setup there in terms of asking our current nurses on the floor to provide some really important preceptor work with nursing students who are in the process of connecting with real patients and learning all the processes and procedures first hand. So we'll find some support from those folks as well, compensation-wise. I also want to kind of comment too that across the state, we have a number of nursing programs, and all of the nursing programs need some updating in terms of their training facilities, simulation labs in particular. All of those facilities need updates periodically here. And in terms of the Northeast Kingdom, and I know Dr. Atkins is here as well. I know that he will be very appreciative to know that we'll be able to, upgrade and upscale a nursing lab here for NVU with monies here. So that's going to be a great bonus here, I think, for our area in the Northeast Kingdom in support of nursing. Our career technical centers are also going to be receiving some additional funding as well to upgrade some of their programs, but primarily to provide some additional opportunities for our high school students to participate in an expansion of CPE programming here beyond school hours. A lot of our high school students are taking courses in the Tech Ed Center around their other school requirements, and some additional funding will help to provide some granting of funds there to help them take other courses that may be happening on weekends here or during evening sessions. So that's going to be a great opportunity for our youth in the Northeast Kingdom. And the last thing I'll comment on here is another piece of the bill here is in regard to our Vermont Serve, Learn, and Earn program. And that program has consisted of the last couple of years here of a consortium of organizations, Vermont Youth Conservation Corps being one of those, provide some opportunities here for young folks across the state to participate in some really meaningful training programs, one of which I'll make mention of and I'm most familiar with is Vermont Youth Conservation Corps. And especially here in the Northeast Kingdom, we have a lot of our youth participating in that program. And the additional funding here for this year will allow them to expand that opportunity for more youth. The demand that Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, from the testimony we received from them, they have a number of students beyond the openings that they have to provide opportunities for them to kind of learn some of those outdoor skills. A lot of those things, trail building and maintenance and other activities working in various natural areas here in the Northeast Kingdom. And that money will be allocated through the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. And it's a great opportunity here. We've got a lot of great things happening in that particular bill. Those are the few things I wanted to highlight here the most here this morning.
Thank you, John. So we'll move on to Representative Scott Beck.
Morning, Darcy. St. Johnsbury has also been touched by reapportionment in a positive way, I think. We went from being the smallest two-seat district in the state to joining Concord and Kirby in one district, and will now be the largest two-seat district in the state. My committee has passed out a few bills recently. House Bill 730, not to be confused with John 703, is a liquor bill. And the big change in there is that people will now be, if it gets all the way through, people would be able to purchase ready to drink at grocery stores and retail stores. For those of you not familiar, those are like the mixed drinks in a can. And as long as they're not over 12% or 24 ounces, you would be able to purchase them there. The tax structure will be the same as it is for beer and wine. We also passed out House Bill 737, which is the annual education yield bill. That bill has the big components are $36 million for tax relief, $36 million to fund a universal school meals program in FY23, if that program is approved, $15 million for a revolving loan fund for CTE to get out in our communities and rebuild housing stock. All told, that bill would be a decrease of $49 million in property taxes in FY23 relative to FY22. So hopefully our property taxpayers would get a little bit of a break. Senate Bill 287, which is the waiting bill that was referred to by Jane, is coming over from the Senate. House Ed will look at the weights and make sure that those are the appropriate weightings that we need in the state, and House Ways and Means will look at the mechanism. There's a lot of the task force and others in my committee, at least, and others don't even believe that weighting is the right mechanism. But those weighting numbers would be valuable from education to determine what how we would make districts whole for their unique circumstances. S53, which is a corporate tax reform bill, amongst many other things, has returned from the Senate. We're looking at it in my committee and trying to determine what the future of corporate taxation in the state of Vermont looks like. And I'll stop there and let the next person speak.
Okay, Scott Campbell.
Unmute there. Good morning, everyone. Yes, as Marcia mentioned, the Corrections and Institutions Committee did pass out the budget adjustment to the capital bill. Actually, I think we only passed second reading on Friday, so it'll be up for final approval on Tuesday, tomorrow, and then over to Joe's committee. It did allocate some additional money besides the 123.8 million that was originally, the bonded authorization, because there was some additional money from past capital bills that was available for reallocation, and something called a bond premium, which is basically an upfront payment received in exchange for a higher interest rate. So that added about 24 million, bringing the total capital investment for FY22 to 23. That's the current year plus next year to 147 million. So that again will be up for third reading on Tuesday, and then over to the Senate. But that sounds like pretty small potatoes compared to the $8 billion appropriations big bill, which passed the House this past week, 135-4. But the capital bill does pay for critical investments in long-term infrastructure. And as Jane mentioned, there's never enough money to meet all the needs. Even with general fund surplus and federal opera dollars, many urgent and worthy requests wind up going unfilled. But the additional money was a good problem to have, and however, it did make this year more complicated than usual. Some capital expenses that were eligible for ARPA were shifted from the capital bill to the big bill, because that's where that money gets allocated. And there was a separate section of ARPA that Marcia mentioned, called the Capital Projects Fund, which provided another 113 million in addition to that 147 million in the capital bill. So nice increase there. Guidelines for that 113 million, though, are very strict. Projects require advanced U.S. Treasury approval before the funding can be authorized. But we in the administration believe the projects for broadband, cell phone towers, assistance for towns to improve connectivity, air quality, and efficiency in community gathering spaces in municipally owned buildings, and a few other things will qualify. The House passed a lot of other important bills. John gave you a very good overview of H703, the Omnibus Workforce Bill, which was really a significant achievement, pulling together a lot of initiatives that people have been talking about for a long time to try to improve our workforce and provide more opportunities and help for people. H711 implements a national. These are a couple other bills that I wanted to mention. H711 implements a national settlement with opioid distributors that will allocate $64 million over 18 years for prevention, treatment, and recovery. H728 connects justice-involved Vermonters to substance use counseling and peer support. Fosters collaboration between emergency medical services, recovery coaches, and treatment providers, and addresses barriers to Medicaid treatment, and also investigates establishing overdose prevention sites, among other things. H624, kind of a big deal for us here, because of Catamount Arts. It invests $17.5 million in Vermont's creative economy, which is a critical economic driver, especially in rural towns. Jody Freed has guided Catamount Arts through the pandemic really well, and we're in a fairly strong position comparatively. But he was an important advocate for this bill that will help many other arts organizations, smaller organizations around the state that have not fared as well. And lastly, I want to mention H715, the Clean Heat Standard. It directs the Public Utility Commission to work out the details for this standard. It would engage fuel dealers in the transition to reducing dependence on fossil fuels by creating a system of clean heat credits. And these credits would be generated by increasing efficiency through weatherization or switching to less polluting fuels. The climate crisis now bearing down on the world is also looming over Vermont. the risks go beyond ticks and a shorter maple sugaring season. The risks are also to our economy as the global economy approaches the tipping point when electrification, renewable generation, and storage become the norm, and the gyrations of oil and gas prices get even wilder with the impacts of climate change, supply and demand imbalances during the energy transition, and the threat of external shocks, such as we're seeing now with the war in Europe. We're vulnerable to this coming instability, and we have fewer resources to prepare for it than states with larger economies. The disruption from planned, deliberate steps like the Clean Heat Standard will be far less than the chaotic, crisis-driven disruption that awaits us if we delay meaningful action further. So, as you can tell, I support H715 strongly, and as well as the other really important bills that we've passed this past few weeks that will help build Vermont's economy and workforce for the uncertain times ahead. So, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Scott. So we'll go with Marty Feltus and then Terry Williams, please.
Good morning. Thank you very much for all those who were able to come this morning. We've talked a lot about money this morning, and I'll continue that. Obviously, how we spend our money is a reflection of our priorities as a state and where we do believe that money should be allocated among the various critical needs of the state. The budget we just passed out of the House is the largest budget that has ever passed the Vermont legislature. It's $8.1 billion. It is large because there's $438 million of federal ARPA funds in there. Those ARPA funds were certainly part of this budget and part of last year's budget and a little bit of the previous year's budget. Those will be gone next year. So our budget will hopefully be trimmed back to what others might consider a more reasonable level. However, we are glad to have that $438 million, and we are continuing the use of those funds as we had agreed upon with the administration a year ago into using them in 5 buckets that we think will really help transform the Vermont economy and the Vermont lifestyle. And that is enhancing access to broadband, to dealing with the climate issues, to dealing with clean water and sewer, to dealing with housing, and to dealing with economic development in the state. We are trying very hard to apply those funds to projects that indeed we think will make a transformative difference. So that is where the $438 million went. And some of the examples are indeed just a lot more efforts in the clean water area to get towns to improve their CSO systems, as an example, to helping landowners conform with our 3-acre zoning, or 3-acre stormwater issue. And there's a lot of other assistance to towns for helping out with flood hazards that will yield a better resilience to us in the future. There's a lot of emphasis on electrification, not only incentives for electric vehicles and charging stations, but also enhancing our electrical grid, which we will have to do if we move more into an electrical energy system as opposed to other energy forms. So there is all that's part of that. There is also $50 million additional in housing, in addition to the 150 or so million that we put in last year. There is some additional funding in terms of economic development. Certainly much of that John Kozinska talked about in the economic development bill and the workforce bill. Some of that can be covered with the ARPA funds. But beyond those ARPA funds, we certainly have sustained the standard budgets of all of the other operations within the state. We have put additional money into the judiciary to help with the issue of the courts reopening, the issue that Senator Benning mentioned. There's not only capital funds, but operational funds that are needed in order to get the courts operating again. And the increase we put into the DAs and the SSAs, the designated agencies that provide home health and adult day services and a variety of other social services that have it suffered, unfortunately, a lack of workforce. And we are believing that some of that certainly is due to the salaries offered. And so, as Senator Kitchell mentioned, the House was able to increase that rate up to 7%. Not as much as was expected, but it certainly will make a significant difference. And higher education has been a part of this budget. Senator Kitchell mentioned the additional funds to the Vermont State College system, which was accelerating the program that we already had, but feeling that we had more money this year, we should put the money in this year and to move that schedule along. But we also increased the appropriation for UVM. We have not changed their appropriation in the last 14 years, and it was felt that some additional funds should go in that area as well. So those are the highlights, I think, of other people have mentioned other parts of the budget. And as everyone has mentioned, there are more requests and more needs out there than we have money for. So some of the priorities that the House made will be questioned, I'm sure, in the Senate, and some of them may be reduced, some of them may be increased, some of them may be thrown out altogether, and others that are pleading for services from the Senate committee will get their fair hearing there. But the bucket is $8.1 billion, and we just have to work within those constraints. I think we've made a responsible budget. Certainly there may be some changes further on, but I think it's a budget that respects the needs for all the various parts of the economy and does look forward to future uses. So I will pass it along. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Terry.
Good morning. One of our exciting topics this month in the Education Committee was PCBs, a chemical that can be found in building products that were used in the late 50s and early 80s. Products such as caulking, elastic sealant materials used in and around windows, door frames, stairways, building joints, masonry columns, fluorescent light ballasts, paints and coatings, ceiling tiles, floor finish, wood products, furniture foam, carpets. Why was it used? Because it gave flexibility, an easier movement within the material. The legislature put a requirement in one of the documents that said all schools must be tested. The Agency of Education and the Agency of Natural Resources got together and made a plan. There are about 296 public schools and more than 100 private schools that make up all schools in Vermont. The first schools to be tested will be those that were built or renovated between the dates I mentioned. That total is roughly 2/3 of the schools. One of the sticklers to the project is the time frame. In order to test that many schools with the added burden of not having enough qualified workforce, on top of making a very concerted effort not to disrupt school learning any more than necessary, they have come back to the legislature to ask for an extension to the completion of the project from 2 years to 4. My follow-up notes on this are, a way for us to tackle the PC problem in the meantime is to have good ventilation and make sure to clean dusty areas. Also, PCBs do not cause cancer, but are harmful to a person's overall health. Thirdly, Vermont is the only state in the United States that is taking action on PCBs. Next topic, universal meals, S100. As mentioned by Representative Beck, the Senate Committee on Agriculture put together a bill to require all public schools of Vermont to make available school breakfast and lunch to all students at no charge. The cost of the school's meals that is not reimbursed through the federal or state funds or other sources would be borne by school districts and therefore ultimately borne by the education fund. This bill also proposes to create incentives for schools to purchase locally produced foods. The bill passed in the Senate and is now being addressed in the House Education Committee. There has been a set aside of $36 million in this year's state budget to fund universal meals for 1 year. The conundrum now is to figure out how to support the program for years to come. In Essex County, as mentioned by Senator Benning, we're still trying to get the courthouse open fully in order to hold court sessions. Estimates for the HVAC system have been submitted. We just passed a bill to help secure those funds. Hopefully, the project can now move forward a little more aggressively. On a personal note, in early February of 2021, as a very new member of the legislative body, I was struggling to figure out how to be an active participant while living on Zoom and trying to find my way around the process. As luck would have it, I was asked by Essex County Sheriff Trevor Colby to write a bill on catalytic converters. With the help of our legislative council, the bill was formed, and there it sat for the duration of the legislative session. The bill proposed to limit the hours during which a person may transport a catalytic converter. It also specifies the person who transports a used catalytic converter shall possess a bill of sale for the item signed by the seller that includes the VIN number of the vehicle from which it was removed. The bill, which is in the House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development, is bringing it up for discussion this coming week and has asked me to come in to the committee room for discussion. Yes, you can say I'm very excited about the possibilities of this becoming law. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Terry. So before we get to the questions, I forgot to mention Catherine Sims sent us a written report, and if you'll bear with me, I will read that for you this morning. Catherine says, this has been a first term like no other. Back in January 2021, our freshman class was sworn in virtually, and our official seating ceremony was postponed until this week. Even though I've been serving for over a year, it was still very moving to have my name called and walk to my seat with my 2 boys and husband watching from the balcony. It's been an honor to serve my community, and I know I couldn't do it without the support of my family. I'm keeping busy during my first term as a legislator serving on the House Energy and Technology Committee and as the clerk of the Rural Caucus. In our committee, we're continuing to improve access to broadband for all, allocating $95 million of ARPA funds to the Vermont Community Broadband Board. We also recommended investing $21.5 million to expand cell service throughout Vermont. Last week, we passed H518, a bill from our committee to provide towns with technical assistance and funding to make municipal buildings more energy efficient and to switch off fossil fuels. Vermont's municipalities own and maintain approximately 2,000 old buildings that are expensive to heat and have a large carbon footprint. This bill is an important step to help us meet our emission reduction goals and save taxpayers money. One area outside of my committee that I've been very active is in the forest economy. Earlier this year, the Rural Caucus introduced the first ever Rural Economic Development Omnibus Bill to support Vermont's forest and forest economy. A major piece of the bill has passed out of the House as part of H703, the Forest Future Strategic Roadmap. The creation of the roadmap will be modeled after the successful Farm to Plate initiative launched over a decade ago. Diverse stakeholders will work with the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation to identify smart investments to strengthen, promote, and protect this vital piece of our economy. And lastly, the House voted on the final map of the new House districts to ensure the current population matches state House representation. There are some significant changes to our region. You can view the new maps on the Vermont General Assembly website. And then Catherine says to go to her website, www.catherinesimsforhouse.com, which offers lots of ways to connect, including monthly office hours, plus a deeper dive into the work we've been doing in this session can be found in her town meeting day report. And so she asked people to please stay in touch. All right, so I'm gonna go to the questions first, and I saw one here from Susan Cherry. And she asks, what are the parameters placed around the new housing funds? And we'll open that up to anyone who would like to take that.
Well, I can try taking it. That money went to VHCB, and one of the things that they have for conditions is perpetual affordability. So that what has been in place would continue. I think there's emphasis on addressing needs of particular populations, including homeless or certain other groups of Vermonters. But I don't think in our budget we put anything additional. But Marty, maybe you can tell us. In the budget adjustment, we had money as well, and including some general fund to give more flexibility than could come with the federal funds, and also leverage the federal tax credits, which made the money go further. But I think that is all we did. But please correct me if I'm wrong, Marty.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would just add that, yeah, confirm that the 50 million we put in our version of the budget just simply went to VHCB with no particular strings attached to it. However, VHCB does work with housing, as Senator Kitchell said, regarding perpetual affordability. And it will be they have a variety of projects. They have small, be revitalizing smaller buildings that maybe have 2 to 3 apartments. All the way to buying former motels and turning them into some affordable housing. So there's a variety of projects. It depends upon certainly the needs of particular geographic areas, where they feel there are gaps, where they can get the appropriate funding. And also, we did spend some regular general funds, as Senator Kitchell mentioned, because that makes it a little more flexible for private investors to get involved and to use some tax credits in order to develop that housing. So there's a huge variety of possibilities out there. And we are hoping that VHCB certainly has the expertise and the background in order to move those projects through quickly, because we need to move them quickly if we are using the federal funding.
Also, VHCB works very closely in our area, Rural Edge, that has a good sense of what our region's needs are. So that although the appropriation goes there, it's very much connected to the local housing entities.
Did anyone else have a comment before I go to the next question? All right, our next question is from Dana Gray. Among the representatives gathered this morning, only Representative Campbell voted in support of H715, the Clean Heat Standard, and he shared a bit about why he favors the legislation. I invite any of the other representatives to share why they voted against it. So that's open to anyone. And looks like Scott Beck has raised his hand.
Yeah, I wrote it in the chat, but I'll just say it for the audience. I'm not sure if the audience has the ability to look at chat, but I wrote the Clean Heat Standard is a regressive carbon tax that will disproportionately hurt poor Vermonters. Vermont would be far wiser to decrease the price of electricity.
Thank you, Scott. Would anyone else like to weigh in?
My comment from Marty would be that I simply think it's too complicated a system. I don't think the consumer will understand how they are being affected. I would simply think that if we want to move to convincing folks, giving them incentive to change their fuel source, that perhaps subsidies for heat pumps or any other vehicle that we want would be a more straightforward way of offering an option to the consumer, to the homeowner here in Vermont, so that they can make those changes. I believe that the complicating factor of the Clean Heat Standard and getting the Public Utility Commission involved, and I a separate commission and 3 commissioners, and all of that is too much of a bureaucracy that will be cumbersome to manipulate and to manage over the future. That's my concern.
Okay, any other comments on that question? All right, I'm going to go to a question that Darcy asked earlier in the chat. The extra monies to the state college system is needed and very much appreciated. Has there been discussion on what needs to be done to ensure the sustainability of the system going forward?
Again, I would say that the plan that we agreed upon with the Vermont State Colleges a couple of years ago, the extensive study that was done and the long-range plan that was put together is what is to ensure their sustainability. It is thought that that plan will be sustainable over time after we get past this transition period. And we are banking on that working, and that the colleges will work together. They will come up with plans that make themselves sustainable, and that the funding sources that we have identified and the funding amounts that we have identified will be sufficient to keep them on a sustainable path in the future.
The other thing that I would just add is there are legislative members of the board, and we really need to rely on them to be vigilant that in fact progress is being made, that there are benchmarks that are relative to the transformation plan and how that process is going. So I would just like to say that we do have that that presence there that should, and we would expect, would be closely monitoring progress relative to the transformation plan.
Laurel, if I could just kick in here as well, part of their sustainability is to make sure they are utilizing the space that would be available to a population that has shrunk considerably. Major maintenance is always an issue in trying to maintain these various college systems. And there has just recently been completed a report on what kind of downsizing the infrastructure needs to have. So I'm going to credit the state college system for at least taking that bull by the horns. It's always been a part of the conversation, but there have never been any realistic steps to try to adjust downward the amount of foot space that these institutions have in comparison to the population of students. And for the foreseeable future, it does not appear that we are going to have any massive increase in student population just based on the birth rates and the current population of elementary and high school students.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to ask another one of Darcy's.
Scott.
Chime in there, my hand's up.
Oh, your hand's up again? Okay, I thought that was the same one, Scott. Go
No.
ahead.
Okay, I'll just throw my 2 cents. I mean, the problem at the colleges is they don't have enough kids. The reason they don't have enough kids primarily is because it's too expensive to go to college. So the legislature needs to continue to increase its support, and the colleges need to increase to provide more value. I mean, UVM has frozen its tuition for 4, if not 5 years now. The colleges need to find a way to do the same thing.
Thank you. Any other comments before we move on?
I wanted to, this is Jane, I wanted to go back. Representative Williams talked about the universal meals. The bill as it passed the Senate originally was universal meals. And we're talking about meals for children whose incomes are higher than kids who are eligible for, families that are eligible for the free or reduced hot lunches. Because of the cost and the concern about what that would mean in terms of impact on the property taxes, which at that point was $40 million, which would be about 4-cent increase. The Senate in the end did not include lunches. It included breakfast, and even that still would, I think that was about a $7 million price tag. And the reason for that is around breakfast being the most important, one of the most important meals as kids are starting out. So I just wanted to say, I think in the House, the conversation had been both lunch and breakfast. That was the original conversation in the Senate, but the thought of the price tag and the potential impact on property taxes was a consideration. And so the bill came over with breakfast.
Okay. We got time for one more question. I'm going to take this from Kelsey. Tuition assistance and loan repayment for mental health, substance use disorders, IDDS was removed or not included in H703. There were other professions represented, but not the above. Could someone speak to why people working in those professions were not included despite the large surge in need for services in these fields? The monies dedicated last year is much appreciated, very popular, and will run out quickly. Who would like to take that to start? Scott Beck. Thank you.
Yeah, I see that John Kosenska has departed, and he probably is the best person to answer this question. We got a drive-by on House Bill 703, and it's just a matter of.
So to you in a minute.
I mean, there just isn't enough money for everything, and you have everybody come in, and it seemed like the needs for the nurses was at the top of the list, and we just couldn't get down all the way down the list just because there isn't enough money. Not that we don't want to, it's just there isn't enough money.
I would add that in addition to it not being specifically called out in 703, there are other parts of our budget in which there are just general scholarship funds available, a variety of funding and various opportunities available for students that are not earmarked to particular career fields, but they are available for students in Vermont to pursue interest in the mental health field and in the substance abuse field. And in the bill 728, there is $9.8 million, some of which can be used for assistance with professionals in the field.
Okay, thank you. So we're coming up on, we just have a few minutes left. So I've asked Darcy to wrap it up for us today. Go ahead, Darcy.
I just wanted to thank
Can I
everybody.
make
I know
one-
it's been of a difficult and challenging legislative session, and we thank you for all that you've been doing, especially with all the monies available out there and what you've had to do to get the budget together. We wanted to remind guests that the Legislative Forum is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the Northeast Kingdom Chamber Facebook page later this morning by Kingdom Access Television. We thank them for that. We also thank you. Thanks are in order to the Caledonian Record for also covering this forum. If you have any questions or suggestions you would like regarding these forums, please let us know. We will be, as we said, trying to get it into an in-person with going to COVID regulations and suggestions in April, and we'll keep you all informed, the legislators, of course, and additionally, all of you folks out there. And we just thank you for the support that you've given our legislators and also the chamber. So thank you so much. Our next forum is when?
Would it be all right if I make one more comment?
Of course it is.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a follow-up comment on universal meals. And this is a personal comment. I'm thankful I am not on the appropriations and the budget committees because that's far from my expertise. I'm on the education committee. I support the children as we all do. And I just want to say that with all the money that is spent throughout the state of Vermont, I feel that we should be able to find money to feed the children. And that's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Okay. The next legislative forum is on Monday, April 25th, again at 8 o'clock. And we will be in touch soon. Anything else from you, Laurel?
Nope, just thank you to everyone. Have a good day.